This week in the conversation, I have the privilege to welcome Chicago-based author E.G. Radcliff. She's the author of a book series titled The Coming of Eid. And the book we're going to be talking about is her latest one titled Wild Court. But before we get into the conversation, I just want to remind everyone that it's important to subscribe to this YouTube channel. And if you do, don't forget to click the notification bell so that way every time a video is posted, it'll go directly into your portable. So let's get started. Again, my name is Ardain Isma, and I am here this afternoon with a wonderful author, with E.G. Radcliff. We're going to be talking about her book series, but precisely her new release, which titled Wild Court. So to get started, E.G., welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, would you please tell the viewers of CSMS Magazine who is E.G. Radcliff?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm an author native to the Chicagoland area. I've been writing for a few years now, and I just released my third book, finishing up the series, The Coming of Aid. I'm really happy to be here, and I can't wait to have a conversation.
I like that. Okay. All right. So The Coming of Aid, it's a long series. Is it going to be a long circle? I know this is the third one. But I'm guessing it's not going to be the final one.
Well, I think it's going to be the final one in the main series. Over the past years, I've fallen in love with these characters. And so it's possible that I'll do a couple spin-offs, maybe, no promises. But I think for the main series, this is probably it. There are going to be other series in the future. They'll different worlds, different characters.
I see that you take an Ed to different stages of his life, from a precarious life at the beginning. Now he's the king. So what made you decide to shift the story this way? Because it's a fantasy story, but I see a lot of humility, which is the process of what we say that of human development. This is how at least I interpret it. So, E.G., is that what you had in mind? Because fiction is so close to reality.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first book, The Hidden King, first as in I wrote it first. There's a prequel that comes like sequentially first, but I wrote The Hidden King first. So in that one, the dynamic of Eid's character arc is relatively traditional. At least in Western storytelling, there's the whole rags to riches trope, I guess. Right. And I liked the idea of spinning off of that.
Okay.
Well, I liked really exploring the ways in which the rags part influenced the riches part. Once, it had power, how would his experiences as someone who didn't have power shape the way he used that power in the future? And so in The Wild Court, I hope that I managed to convey his efforts to let his past kind of inform his decision making.
Okay. In Wild Court also, I see that he has a son, right? Ronan?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and usually in dictatorial societies where strong men or a monarchy is the law of the land, there's always such kind of perennial sentiment just to keep, even, as human, we're not going to live forever, but we just want our legacy to remain. And usually the king or the queen or the strong person would turn to his or her close relative. And while court, it's the impression that I'm getting. But it seems to me there's some sort of a resistance that Ronan maybe doesn't seem to understand, uh, uh, you know, uh, the role of absolute power in a society. And I see that in some countries also in the Middle East or even in sub-Saharan Africa. When the strong person tries to pass on, even in on my own country in Haiti, where I was born, we had a dynasty that lasted 29 years. Father passed it on to son. Is that what really you're trying to teach society in this particular book?
Teach society. That's a lot of responsibility. No, I think it's so I was very interested in so Ronan is Aid's adopted son, not by blood. Son / younger brother, I guess, because there really isn't too much of an age difference between them. Aid adopted Ronan when he was like maybe 14. So it's not like there is definitely a paternal sort of overtone, but it's not the only factor in their dynamic. So I think Ronan's resistance to being the next in line to this,
Right.
this monarchical power, I think his resistance stems in part from he's a teenager. He might not fully understand like the weight of a title.
Right.
But also from the fact that when he was a child, he was not necessarily privy to such, I guess the privileges that, being royalty would offer. And so he's used to a level of poverty, but also a level of freedom that, I don't know, your question is interesting. And so I'm trying to process it at the same time I have an answer. I would not say that I'm trying to reinforce the existing real world dynamics, I guess. I use that word a lot, but it's the only one I can think of. I wouldn't say I'm trying to reinforce that, but I am sort of trying to explore the intricacies of a system that does exist.
That's precisely how I interpret it. I never understood or interpreted it as a reinforcement. Because the problem is, in society, even within conservative families, for example, where I came from, and where my parents would want me to grow up and become probably doctors or engineers or, what society really has fully accepted as the norm. You would want a child to be that way. Okay, so growing up in Chicago, did you feel at a very young age some sort of passion for literature?
Yeah, actually, I did. I read a lot, and I read way beyond the level that I actually was capable of reading,
Right.
just because I liked the books and I liked the words and I liked trying to figure out what each word meant. So I think I remember in second grade, I must have been 7.
Okay.
And had a standardized test where we
Okay.
write a story.
Okay.
And I think the school got out at like 3:00 and we started at 2:00. And
Okay.
I until about 4:30. Everyone else had left. The teacher was just sitting in the corner kind of waiting for me.
Okay.
And I wouldn't stop. So eventually she had to be like, okay, I need to go home. Like I have a family. And so she had me stop, but I kind of realized at that point, like, this is something I find really, really fun. The other kids in the class, I'm sure they had a good time. It was story writing in second grade, but I really found a way to express myself. And I also found out that, for a while when I was young, it was, kind of a way for me to process anything that happened. If something happened that made me frustrated, I would narrate it to myself and try to figure out the best way to, explain how I felt and why it made me feel that way. And I think that skill building early in life, which I wasn't, seeing as skill building, it was just something I was doing,
Naturally.
that really, I think, influenced,
Uh-huh.
my love of it later.
Uh-huh. And that support you really need as an author,
Mhm.
you do. Now, the other problem, every time in the conversation, we always raise this issue when it comes to publishing, and especially in the Twitter community where we belong. It's the issue of finding a publisher. The book industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and a bulk of that is from independent publishing and even self-publishing. But the big question is sometimes, it's not easy to pierce through the big one, the Harper Collins of the world, these ones. But you have a book, you have to market it. And that's sometimes it could be very, very difficult. So how did you go about marketing? Even an indie publisher can publish your book, but still you have to be part of the marketing process. Who is best can promote his book, which is the author himself or herself, right? So how is the marketing going for Wild Court at the moment?
It's been going well now. It was a bit of a rocky start because there was a lot of, the learning curve was pretty steep. It was in the beginning, I think one of the most important things was figuring out Amazon algorithms and how that, works, because oh God, it's so complicated.
So let me ask you something right here. You just saying something very, very important. You just mentioned Amazon algorithm. This is the first time I have a friend in the conversation who's raising that. Is there any way, E.G., can you teach a little bit for authors out there? How does that work?
Well, okay, so there's so many layers to this. A really big important part of that is keywords, and also making sure that you're in the right categories. So a lot of the times when people go to buy a book, they have a specific idea of what kind of book they're looking for. So they might search teen vampire novel, something like that. Okay. And so, if you're selling teen vampire novels, which obviously I'm not, but
Okay.
If you're selling teen vampire novels, you want to make sure that the people can find your book. The people who are looking for your kind of book can find your book. So you want to make sure that you get the keywords of vampire or stuff like that. And so you can put those in the heading, like the actual listing for your product. You can put those in the description. But having keywords is super important. The other thing is making sure that your book is in the right categories. So, there's categories for fantasy, but then there's also categories for dark fantasy or for steampunk or for LGBTQ plus fantasy. And these categories get more and more specific as you go through. And a lot of times people who, if they don't have a specific book they're looking for, consumers will go on Amazon and just kind of browse those categories.
Okay.
Now, it is important to note that you can get in trouble for putting your book in the wrong categories.
Okay.
Because, if you're just trying to super increase your viewership and you just dump it into every category there is, that will get you kind of knocked down in the algorithm, because it'll be like, the people who are looking for your book are also buying things that are completely unrelated. And the also bots on Amazon influence, what they'll recommend, what products they'll recommend to people. So if you want your product to get recommended, you need people who buy things like your product to also buy your product. It gets really
So E.G., did you get someone to really teach you how to do that?
Well, this is another one of those places where the community of supporters that I have been really, really helpful, because some of the people who have been supporting me have been more experienced at this. And so then they can sort of turn around and help me out.
Okay.
But there's resources. I mean, some people have published books on indie publishing. There's a lot of bloggers who address this. There's a lot of resources if you go to look for them. And then, some of it, Amazon doesn't necessarily want you to figure out its algorithms. It's kind of
do that. It doesn't want to do. Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
But yeah, there is information out there, and so it just took a lot of research, which again, I had a lot of help.
Piece of information that you're showing in the conversation this afternoon. It's just unfortunate for the purpose of time, but this is something maybe I might have to invite you again in the conversation to do an entire conversation just on that. maybe sometimes in the future. Yeah. But by the way, I went to check your book. I had the copy of the book. So I went to check your book, and I check also the sales link on it. Selling really, really well. And I compliment you for that. Now I understand why. This is great. Now, every time I have a friend in a conversation, at sometimes we start talking about literature, and then we switch to something, e.g., a bit little cussy, because we are on Earth, we're not on the outer space, we're human. And you just mentioned that at a very young age, you were kind of addicted to reading. And I'm pretty sure as a writer right now, you have some preferences. So which author you would consider as your number one? It doesn't have to be an American author.
That's really hard.
It's hard?
Oh gosh, I've read so many great books. Okay, so I think I need to divide this up a little bit. So
okay.
I think that my favorite modern fantasy author, just not in terms of who they are as a person, because obviously I don't know them, but in terms of the books they write, I am a huge fan of Sarah J. Maas. I think that her world building specifically is incredible, and like the absolute emotions that she manages to pull out of her character relationships is really intense. And so I'm very inspired by that.
What's his name again?
Sarah J. Maas.
It's a female author, right?
Yeah. And it's Maas with 2 A's. She did A Court of Thorns and Roses and Throne of Glass. So I'm a big fan of that. Okay. But I also really enjoy older literature. So I'm actually very interested in Arthurian legend, and like the sort of that legend has so many iterations, largely stemming throughout the British Isles and like France. I've read it's in Middle English. I've read Le Morte d'Arthur. I've read some Victorian plays on Tennyson. I have some slightly more modern ones that are in like I want to say 1900s. T.H. White wrote The Once and Future King, and that is just a mind-blowingly good book.
Okay. So I want to zero it down to one.
Oh God. Okay. I think I'm gonna have to go with T.H. White, because he wrote The Once and Future King, which is this take on Arthurian legend, but I think he combines all of the things I love about the different authors I've mentioned and kind of puts it into one book. He manages to take so much emotion out of these old stories and imbue them into these really profoundly human relationships.
Okay.
And I swear, no matter how many times I read that book, I cry at the end. It's incredible. So probably T.H. White, yeah.
Okay. How about food? Cooking, cuisine, yeah.
Yes. I wish I could say that I'm an excellent cook. I would say I'm a mediocre cook.
Yeah. But you cook.
I do cook, yeah. I'm trying to think, what is my favorite thing to make? I make pretty good soup, actually.
What kind of soup?
I have this like vegetable and beef stew recipe that I found in a hand-me-down cookbook when I was like 10. And this hand-me-down vegetable beef stew has just kind of like it's carried me. It's so easy to make, and you can stick it in the freezer and it tastes better days after, and it's
Okay.
very
Okay.
basic and easy to make.
If I understand correctly, so you cook more than you just cook. Now, due to COVID also, it kind of limit um, the way we used to go out and eat at a nice restaurant.
Yeah.
We just substantially limit that. But
I've definitely been cooking more since COVID started, and I got really good at making banana bread.
okay. Okay. Maybe when I get to the Chicago area, you'll probably make me banana bread. How's that? Okay, now my last question. Okay, I know a young writer like you. I mean, you do have long career ahead of you. So there are many young writers like you out there. If there's one lesson you would want to give to any of them, decided like you to embark upon the journey to use the pain to teach the world, what lesson would you give?
I think probably the most important lesson is that if your work is kind of bad, that's okay and it'll get better.
Mhm.
I think a lot of times, especially, I'm from a slightly more like, it's suburban, but it's also got that like urban kind of pace of life. There's a lot of pressure to be really good at something really quickly. And that's just not conducive to becoming a better writer, especially if anything regarding the arts, it's not going to happen fast. So take your time, let yourself be bad.
That's what you say that. Let yourself be
Yeah.
bad. And then you learn from the mistakes, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So with that, it's been such a pleasure, EJ, to have you this afternoon in the conversation.
Yes, it's been a pleasure to be here.